So when I came to, which was almost instantly, I try to stand up and I can't, and I look down and my left leg was gone, above knee,
Like gone.
completely. Blood just squirting out. I can see my bone down to my kneecap, but everything else is gone. It's entirely gone. And I go to lift up my right leg, and my foot's backwards, and both bones were snapped entirely in half. And I'm freaking out. I'm thinking I'm going to be stuck in the building. I'm going to bleed out and die.
You're gonna die.
Yeah.
You thought that was it.
And I did all this work. I mean, I remember looking back on the timeline on Facebook, and the day before this happened, I celebrated 2 years, 7 months clean.
We are back again, and we have a referral from another guest, which I always love. We have Jordan Hart with us today.
Thank you.
I don't know a whole lot about your story. Obviously, I like to go into these things kind of blind, so the reactions are genuine on both sides. So tell us a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up, and where you were raised.
I grew up on the west side of Columbus, Ohio. My mom and dad, they were a product of addiction and alcoholism. I remember a lot of nights growing up, they would, be up for a few days drinking and doing drugs and smoking crack. And, they would get into an argument, into a fight. And I would kind of like be scared, waking up in the middle of the night, 6, 7 years old.
Okay.
And they
Yeah.
would just be demolishing the house. I mean, tearing everything up in the house.
And you can't make 2 cents of what's going on because how could you? You're 6 and 7.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't know exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
How was school for you?
I didn't take school seriously. My parents would kind of put their 2 cents in if I wasn't doing well with my grades. But other than that, they didn't really monitor me as far as school. So, I mean, I didn't take any of it seriously. Didn't really get good grades. I had the potential, but just
So did
didn't.
you attend elementary and middle school and all that?
Yeah.
Show up, do your homework, did pass your classes?
Sometimes even then didn't pass my classes, not doing my homework, things like that. And there was parts where I didn't even go to school.
Were your parents being active alcoholics? I mean, I can't imagine. You would think that would be at the forefront of their mind, but did they try to get you to go to school or get you to do
No,
the right thing?
my dad, he always said I'm smarter than all your teachers, and I didn't have to go if I didn't want to.
Wow. Okay, so you had the
Yeah.
green light to just not go.
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty much.
Okay, fantastic. So moving, when you get older, what's your first introduction into drugs and alcohol? How does that enter your life, or when do you find out your parents are using drugs?
Well, I always kind of knew what was going on in the back of my mind. I knew what they were doing wasn't good. First introduction was, I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. My dad's like, I'm going to the store. You want anything? I said, yeah, whatever you're drinking. And he drank 40s of King Cobra at the time. And he
Okay.
was like, how many you want? I said 2 of them. He's like, you ain't going to drink 2. And he brought them back, and I drank both of them.
240s.
Yep.
That's 7.
Yeah.
How did that feel? What did that do to you?
My dad thought it was funny. I remember not being able to walk, and I was like kind of using the wall to hold me up and everything. This free floaty feeling. My mom, she didn't know what to think of it. She came home from work and basically just realized I was drunk.
You were tanked.
Yeah.
And Dad was just enjoying the show.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there any feeling of, was that a moment for you where you were like, oh, I kind of like this. This is neat, or?
It was kind of a moment of okay, so this is bonding with my
Okay.
my parents pretty much.
It it helped you felt like you were bonding with your dad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Keep going. Take us to high school.
Yeah, so as I got older, I tried to basically numb what was going on at home with gateway drugs and alcohol. My grandparents, they gave me the finer things in life. They had the nice house. they didn't do any kind of drugs or alcohol or anything. They had the nice things. And
Normies, so to speak.
yeah.
Okay.
And, so I seen both ends of the spectrum. Like, my parents, we grew up poor, grandparents had nicer stuff. They felt bad for me, and they did a lot for me growing up. But, by that time, I was already heading down that path.
Right.
Um, so by the time they did end up getting custody of me, I was already getting in trouble, skipping school.
When was that in your like? How old were you when they got custody of you?
They got custody of me in middle school. I
Okay.
do remember that, and it kind of got bad once I hit high school.
Okay.
So
Yeah, you mentioned like gateway drugs and things like that. What kind of things were you dabbling in
dr-
freshman, sophomore year?
drinking, smoking weed, and then as like the crime stuff progressed, it was like ecstasy, pain pills, cocaine, just a plethora of different substances.
Were you like did were you like popular in high school? Were you like the man? Were you like selling drugs? What was your shtick? What was your
I wouldn't say I was popular, but everybody knew me. I kind of knew everybody. Uh, what I was drawn to was like the fast-paced lifestyle, the hustle part of it, and the girls, the clothes, the money, just kind of living life minute by minute and not really thinking about consequences or what life looks like down the road.
by the time you got to your senior year, what did your life look like?
So eventually, I went from group home to group home. Grandparents couldn't take care of me no more.
Okay.
They were tired of it.
Foster care?
Yeah. And I kept getting in trouble, kept doing the same thing. Eventually, detention centers as a juvenile.
What
Um,
what happened? What'd you get popped for?
so I was in Chillicothe. That was my last foster home. I ended up still in a vehicle. I was under the influence.
So just straight up grand theft.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and you're drunk.
Yep.
Okay.
Drunk, under the influence. I think I was taking Xanax at the time.
Okay.
I was trying to get back to the city to get back to my family, and then ended up going to the city, but then went immediately back to Chillicothe and ended up getting pulled over, arrested, which isn't my first time. But they were pretty much just tired of the whole situation and everything. I had a pistol in the door.
That's at 17?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So, and then I ran. Eventually they found me, arrested me.
You ran on foot?
Yeah,
You ran. Okay,
ran on
so
foot. Yeah,
ditched the car and you ran.
yeah. I had a flat tire. I was driving it on the flat.
Were they chasing you? Was this like a chase?
I was getting pulled over. I
Okay.
got out, and then I just dipped.
Okay. And they caught you. You go to jail for the first time.
Yep, for the first time.
What was that like for you?
Um, I didn't really know what to make of it. I knew that kind of came with the circumstances.
The
of that.
territory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it sucked. I never did like being in an institution or being locked up. For me, not having freedom, not having any control, I didn't like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and at 17, dude, I have to imagine, like, I know you grew up on the west side of Columbus, but, like, I have to imagine still there was some fear going into a detention facility at 17 years old.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I bounced around from a few different ones. They ended up offering me a drug program for juveniles that had drug problems. It was called Abraxas. It was in Mansfield. So I ended up taking the program and I went to that, and I just kind of faked it until I made it. Still didn't learn like my lesson or anything.
Well, you're young. 17, I mean, is it really going to click at 17 and you're going to stop?
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, we think we're invincible
Yeah.
at that age. So,
Yeah.
you do the drug program, great, completed, I assume.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
you get put on probation or anything?
I wasn't on probation. It was basically like based on your behavior to complete, so they could keep you till you're 18.
Okay.
Um, so I ended up getting my GD while I was in there. That was probably the only decent thing
That's
I
good.
did.
Yeah.
And then my grandparents were still there. They were supportive, thinking that I'm turning a new leaf, I'm turning my life around, and I did okay for a little while, but ultimately back down the same path.
What did that look like?
Well, so they took me back in. I'm living with them.
So grandparents took you back
Yeah,
after the juvie thing.
yeah,
Okay.
yep. They took me back. They supported me while I was in there. Bought me shoes, clothes. I took my home passes to their house. Um, I ended up getting into a relationship, and that was kind of my issue growing up. Is I would do good for somebody else, like a girlfriend or a significant other, but then when that didn't work out, I would just self-destruct.
Tank. Yeah.
So like, there's no point on doing good anymore. And I would just go back to doing the same thing. Like, I just didn't see my self worth pretty much.
And you're just at this point. I mean, as an adult, I'm assuming you're 18 at this point. You're taking just whatever, or do you have a drug of choice?
Um, Mainly at that time, it was like weed and alcohol. And it came in spurts here and there. But it progressed to other things as I
Okay.
got older.
Tell me about that.
By the time I was like 19, 20, I have a daughter on the way, kid's mom's pregnant, and, she wants me to take things serious, obviously, because I'm about to be a dad.
Yeah.
Um, and I would get a job and I would work, but I was taking my paychecks and spending on drugs. And, like, I remember specifically one day I was working third shift at a gas station, and I ended up getting a bunch of Xanax and Percocet and weed, and I was doing them while I was at work. Got off, went straight to the liquor store, and was waiting for the liquor store to open, basically like in the parking lot waiting,
Sure.
and go in and get a fifth of Henny. And so I drank that and did all these Xanaxes and Percocets that day. Forgot that I had to go back to work. They called me, and so I ended up going in, but I ended up falling asleep in the back. I passed out.
They fire you
Yeah, they fired me.
on the spot.
Yep, on the spot.
What did that do? How did grandma and grandma take that?
Everybody took it harsh. It didn't go very well, and I think the hardest part about it was seeing my kid's mom cry. And I'm supposed to be doing the right
Support.
thing, yeah,
Yeah.
support, and there I am, like, just messing everything up.
Okay.
And I remember her crying, and I just felt horrible about what I did and like who I was, and I kind of got it together there after that for a minute.
What did that look like together?
Well, I got a different job,
Okay.
and I stopped partying. I started saving like every penny I had, got us apartment and everything. But then, like, once I got that apartment, I'm like, okay, now we're good. They got a roof over their head. But I didn't look at it as this is my family's house. I just had a daughter. I looked at it like this is my place. Nobody can tell me what to do.
And I imagine in the back of your head, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you were thinking once I get all this shit, my ducks in a row,
Hmm.
then I'll use or drink like a gentleman, and
Yeah.
we'll be, because that's our dream, right?
Yeah.
Is to be able to fucking drink or use like a gentleman or have one here or there, and we can't do that. Or I can't do that.
Yeah, I couldn't either. It was the same thing. I couldn't imagine living life without doing some sort of substance or
Mhm.
drug or alcohol. So, but yeah, and it was right by my parents. That was another issue. Is I all that time I wanted to get away, then I just couldn't stay away once I was at a certain point in my addiction.
Meaning what?
There was always something going over to the house. Always some kind of party, drinking, drug use. My dad always had friends over. So I just wanted to be there all the time, as opposed to when I was younger growing up.
So you weren't staying at home with the family.
No, I was constantly over at my parents' house.
Okay.
I'd leave her there with the kid,
'Cause you
and
could party.
yeah, yeah,
And it was with your parents.
yeah.
And just so you know, I did the same thing with my mom. I got high with my mom. She didn't make it. She lost her life to the disease.
Sorry to hear that.
It happens, but it's interesting to hear that you also had the same experience. We've had a lot of guests on that have used with their parents. It's a lot more prevalent than I realized. Like,
Yeah,
I always felt weird about it for a long time. I didn't share it for a long time.
yeah,
But it happens a lot. And it's super influential. If your parents are doing it, can't be that bad, right?
right, yeah.
So take us forward through this journey.
So I would party at my apartment sometimes, but I got introduced to opiates, and
What year?
that was probably my first like love. Year I couldn't tell you 100%. I think I might have been like 20 at the time,
Okay.
maybe. Um,
Like mid
yes,
2000s?
it's something like that,
Like
somewhere
when
around there.
Oxycontin was around still, or
Yeah, yep.
okay.
I think oxys were around, Opanas were around at the
Yep.
time.
Yep.
Um,
God, I haven't heard that for a while.
yeah, so I had this bright idea. I lost my job, and so we get income tax, and I'm like, I'm gonna start hustling. I start selling weed, and I had somebody tell me about these 30s, and I'm like, okay, I don't know anybody that does them, and they said basically just get them and trust me, they'll
Move
go.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, so and I started doing it myself. That half turned into a whole, turned into multiple a day, and it just progressed, and it got really bad.
So, did you sell some of them?
Started to until I started doing them all. Yeah, I never had that ability to hustle. I was always just a straight up,
You would use your own
yeah,
shit.
yeah, drug addict.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay. So you get into the 30s.
and then got introduced to the Panas for the first time, and this was before they did the gel thing where you can't crush
Yeah.
them, so you could
Yep.
crush them at the
Yep.
time. And I remember 140 would like last me a whole week.
Yeah. Those motherfuckers are strong. They're strong.
Yeah. So every day I'm snorting those and drinking on top of it, and it just got really bad. And so we ended up losing the apartment, and I caught my first charge
Okay.
for possession
As an
for some
adult.
30s. Yeah.
Okay.
And at the time we had a son, so this is a little bit down the road. And I remember we got pulled over near like Delaware County, which is like north of Columbus here in Ohio, but they don't play in Delaware. It's not like the workhouse where you just slap on the wrist. They literally have a plaque that says we don't do it how Franklin County does it. And
Do they really?
yeah, yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah, they
Wow.
stroke you in there too. As far as like giving harsh sentences and everything, as opposed to what Columbus would give you in Franklin County. So, but I remember we got pulled over and they brought the canine out and searched the vehicle and everything. And I remember they took my son out his car seat.
Oh, your son was with you.
Yeah, yeah, he was in the back, and they took him out of his car seat, kind of pat him down, searched his car seat, dumped out his
Wait,
formula.
they checked the baby.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They checked everything.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's the first time I've ever heard that. I've never seen that on cops. I've never seen that on like live PD.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. My kid's mom had to get our son out of the car seat, and they kind of checked everything and all his stuff, and yeah, it was
They
pretty bad.
you said they dumped the formula.
Yep, yep. They were looking through that, and then they put me in the car. Um, And I remember whispering to myself, like, don't check the cigarette pack. And I look up and there's a microphone in the car, not thinking. And immediately that's what they checked. So, and they basically said somebody has to fess up or my kid's mom would be charged because the car was in her name. And so
Okay.
I took the
Took
rap
the
on
charge.
it. Yeah.
And
So,
what'd you get charged with?
possession,
Just,
F5.
just an F5 possession, but it was
Yeah.
in Delaware.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was in Delaware. So, um, kid's mom, she left. I don't blame her. She did bond me out. Um, and then
Nice of her.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And but we weren't together, and that was kind of devastating at the time. My thought was, it's my kid's mom. She ain't going to go anywhere. Um, and I put her through a lot as far as the way I treated her. Cheating on her, the mental abuse and somewhat physical abuse, and um, I was really a piece of shit when it came to how I treated her. Really, how I treated anybody. So I ended up going on the run, and she told me one day she's like, SWAT raided my grandparents, and I'm like, there's no way for an F5, and it was the U.S. Marshals that actually came
Wow. For one F5.
for one F5.
And
Yeah.
they raided your grandparents' house.
Yep.
Obviously, you weren't there.
Yeah, I wasn't there. I was in London living with a cousin of mine,
Okay.
and I was like watching cops and like locked up every day, just waiting for my time.
I used to watch Intervention and shit like that.
Yeah.
I used to watch Intervention and talk about how stupid the people in the show were. Like I'd never be like that. Like
Yeah.
laugh at them, and it's like next thing you know, I'm fucking just like them. But That's funny. So when did they catch up with you?
It took a few months later, and I remember I was like asleep on the couch. I started falling asleep, and I'm watching Cops, and I hear crunching like by the front door from the snow. And I look out, and they have the vest and the badge and the machine gun across the chest, and there was no getting out of that. So
Okay. So they grab you.
yeah, they got me, and I was scared to death. I was shaking. I'm like, this is serious,
Yeah, I don't fucking blame you. Yeah.
So, and I ended up going to court and basically telling them like, I burnt every bridge. I don't have nowhere to go, nowhere to stay. My family doesn't want anything to do with me.
They took you to Delaware County Jail.
Yeah.
How long did you sit before court?
I went to court fairly quick. I think it was like a couple weeks.
Oh wow. Okay.
And I just said, let me go do my time, and then so they sent me to prison.
Oh, you asked.
Yeah.
You said just give me my time.
Yep.
Wow. And what'd they give you?
They ended up giving me 8 months when
Okay.
it was all said and done.
Okay.
So, which is like enough to be like, okay, is the introduction of going to prison.
Yeah.
But yeah, still didn't learn anything from that though.
Okay. Well, what was your first prison experience like? You're
Um,
very nonchalant about the correctional facilities.
yeah. So with the correctional facilities, everybody goes to CRC, which is our intake.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there it's 20. What is it? 23-1. So like you come out for chow to eat. You come out for rec every once in a while. I think it like rotates every other day.
Okay.
You have rec indoor one day and then outside another day. But yeah, you're locked in that cell, man, and they're not very big. I mean, you got enough room to walk in between the beds, and there's a sink and a toilet. But I mean, other than that, that's it. But we're chameleons. We blend in. That's what we're good at.
Of course.
So even though I didn't know what to expect or what to anticipate, I just acted like I knew what I was doing.
I mean, that's all you can do in that situation, especially it being your first time, is
Yeah.
just try to move slow and keep your eyes peeled and learn the etiquette and move on. So, what parent institution did they move you to?
So I ended up going to North Central
Okay.
in Marion.
Okay.
It was just basically like a college campus for criminals. You just learn to do other criminal stuff. Making breaks, tattoos. The drug thing was real big in there.
What kind of drugs?
Mainly Suboxone.
Okay.
And some weed. Them Suboxone strips would go for $200.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
I've heard 2 to 5.
Yeah, sometimes more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just depends, and like, yeah, it's just crazy. I didn't really use when I was in there. I was a state baby, so $18 a month. That ain't a whole lot of money.
Right.
So
Nobody was putting money on your books at that point in time. It was pretty much a
no,
wrap.
I had some help a little bit from my family here and there, but for the most part, I didn't really have anything.
Pretty much indigent.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was fortunate enough to have them put money on the phone just to call.
Right. It's okay. So you do your first day. You do your 8 months. Sounds like there was no issues, no fights, anything crazy.
No, nothing. I mean, I've seen some crazy stuff as far as like people fighting. And
What was one of the craziest things you saw in North Central?
I remember I was at Chow and some dude ended up getting his tray smacked out of his hand, and then they kind of got into a fight. The guy that kind of lost, he went back and followed him to the pod, and had a bunch of friends with him, and they were kind of sitting around waiting to call for the yard open. And as soon as they call yard open, they jumped this dude, and I remember he smacked his head on the rack, and it just split his head open. I just remember him kind of like seizing and convulsing and like shaking and just bleeding to death, and I'm like, that dude's gonna die. And then they just went out to the yard, and nobody got in trouble for it. But they had the guy back a couple days later with his head all bandaged up and wrapped up.
Say, he survived?
Yeah.
But I can only imagine smacking your head off one of those steel corner racks. I mean, whew, it's painful.
That's when I knew. I'm like, yeah, I'm in prison.
Okay. That's when you're like, this is real. I'm here.
Yeah.
And it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay. So you complete that 8 months. You get out, back to the same shit.
Day one, man.
Oh, really?
Yeah, day one. My dad was there to pick me up, and I had a tall boy beer waiting on me, pack of cigarettes, and I took that gate pay, and you get like it was like $100 or
Yeah, I was gonna
something.
say like 80, $100 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And I went home and I bought some Percocet and some weed, and I'm right back to square one, kind of.
God, so you just picked up right where you left off.
And I told myself while I was in there, I'm never going back to that life again. And that's basically as far as I made it.
Was the parking lot?
Yeah, the parking lot.
Okay.
Um, from that point, I did kind of okay. I met a girl. She had like the house, the cars, and like she had motorcycles, and like she did really well for herself.
Convenient.
Um, she had me come and live with her, and I'm like working at McDonald's, making shit money. I'm doing side work for people. Um, I was doing like drywall on the side with her cousin and landscaping with my grandpa as well. And I'm selling weed on the side, and things are good for a while. But then I had the bright idea of like my birthday was coming up, and I wanted to do some perks, and
Yeah, celebrate.
yeah, so I get some, and I'm like, I'm gonna do these today, and I'll get more for the birthday. Um, and that just took me right back to square one again, on the weekends, and then every day. Then you can't afford it.
Right back to opiates.
Yep.
So you just said you can't afford it. Do you start committing crimes at that
Uh,
point?
it gets that point, so the relationship didn't work out. We
Uh,
we break up, obviously.
was she a user or like a drinker or anything?
No, she
She
didn't
just had her
really.
shit together and you
She's
guys
been around
clicked.
people that have, and she
Yeah.
kind of knew about that life, but she never really did anything herself.
But she was like, fuck that, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So once that ended, and I'm like back at my parents, I'm like the only thing I have is a job. I felt like I lost everything, kind of. And I did the one thing I said I was never going to do, and I ended up IVing heroin that day and smoking crack.
So your first time shooting up heroin, how did you do it?
I had somebody do it for me. Looking back, I realized the person that helped me do it didn't really know what he was doing either. Um, you know, but once I realized you could put anything in a needle, I didn't want to do a drug a different way.
Never turn back.
Yep.
Same way for me.
Yep.
I always said I was wasting my drugs if I didn't put them in a needle.
Yeah.
Like that's how I looked at it. What kind of consequences did that bring, or crimes, or
Yeah.
how did your life change after that?
I eventually became homeless. Sleeping outside at parks. Sometimes doing work for the dope man. Whatever he had me doing around the house. Letting him talk to me crazy. Disrespectful. Just whatever to get another hit. Front door and back door and people. Robbing, stealing, whatever I could until I burnt every bridge, basically.
Right.
Eventually, I ended up meeting this girl. She was an older woman, and she introduced me to meth at the time. And she had a house. She let me come and live with her. She supplied my drug habit, took care of me, basically. I
So
put that woman through a lot. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, through a lot.
I was gonna say that's like a dream. Like now you've got somebody that's supplying your drug habit, and you're
Yeah.
moving in with them. You say you put her through a lot. What happened?
So for about 3 years straight, we did meth, crack, and heroin every day. We would stay up for 5, 6, 7 days at a time. I think 7 days was the longest I stayed up.
Your record.
Day 3, stuff starts getting weird.
Yeah.
You start seeing shadow people or think people's in the house. Or, when you're taking a stethoscope and you're listening to the walls because you think people are in the attic. I mean, it's pretty bad. And I felt like I was living in hell, pretty much.
Wow. So you were like stethoscoping the fucking walls to
Yeah.
see if there are people like there.
Yeah,
listening?
trying to listen to see if I heard people. We would close all the blinds, the windows, lock up all the doors, turn out all the lights,
All the tweakers.
tiptoeing in the house, like thinking people were trying to get in from the outside or vice versa. It was pretty bad. Yeah.
So did you switch to meth?
I did all three.
Okay.
Mainly meth and heroin, but it would be meth, crack, and heroin. But
Okay.
it just depend on how much money, things like that. Meth is pretty cheap, so
Right. And it lasts forever.
yeah. And I was just in this kind of crazy psychosis, you know, and I was just miserable. That girl, I ended up like stealing everything out of her house, and selling it. And she came back home to an empty house.
Oh, like you took it all at once?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, so she went on a vacation. Um, we had a plan for me to kind of for me to be able to get well while she's gone.
Okay.
And then she ended up getting a hair up her ass and was like, well, screw that plan, and kind of screwed me out of the deal. So I knew a dope dealer that was basically getting a new apartment, and I'm like, I can furnish it for you. So I sold the couch, the table, the kitchen table chair, like everything that I could possibly sell, flat screens,
Holy
you name
shit.
it, I sold it all. Yeah.
And when she got home, what was her reaction?
Well, I was in jail. She did answer. She put money on the
Oh, so
phone.
you got picked up before she got back from
Yeah.
vacation?
Yep.
For what?
I was actually, I ended up, so I did like a tattooing as a side hustle.
Okay.
I was okay. I wasn't like very good, but
Sure.
self-taught. And I told these people I'd do a tattoo on them, and they were paying me in pills. And I went to go trade the pills for heroin. But my tattoo equipment got stolen and sold. So I went with them with the empty bag. Said I was going in here to this place and I'll be right back. Never came back out. Um, some stuff happened that night at this house. Normally I don't stick around, and this night I did. Somebody got shot. The house got surrounded, and I had warrants and stuff too on top of that. So
You
for
were
some
there.
theft charges.
They grabbed you up.
Yep.
So
Grabbed me
you
up.
kind of like avoided the wrath of of the girlfriend
Yeah.
and emptying her house because you were locked up. You didn't have to like face it head on.
Yep. Pretty much.
Okay, but she
But
called you, or
yeah.
she put money on the phone, and you could call her.
Yeah. So, but she was hurt, she's like, I just can't believe you would do this. And, but that's how it goes when you're,
No,
when you're on the
100%.
drugs and stuff.
Yeah, no, that's 100% how it goes. Um, how long did you set the second time around?
The second time they gave me 14 months. I had a
Back to
few,
prison.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I had a few felony thefts.
Okay.
One specifically was for, I was staying at a friend's house, and, I had a bunch of dope. We went through all that, and they ended up letting me stay there, help me get kind of like a side job and stuff to try to help me get up on my feet. But they wanted me to take basically all the money I was making from work and give it to them, and they were spending all their money on dope. And I'm like, screw that. And I'm dope sick. I don't have any cigarettes. I don't have any money. So I decided to take the flat screen TV off the wall, and I put it in the car. And I take their car, and I needed cigarettes real bad, so I stopped to get cigarettes. And they pulled up on me in their other car, and found me. And I got in, slapped it in reverse, and smashed into their other car, with their car basically. And then from that point, they got me out of the vehicle, and I ran, and I slept in the woods that night. It was a horrible experience.
Jesus Christ. Holy shit. Okay. And this is post second time
Yeah, post.
in prison?
Yep, post second time.
Did
Yep.
they press charges on you?
Oh yeah, they press charges. Yep, they press charges. I still owe for that, but I did the time.
Restitution.
Yeah.
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 So they press charges after the second time. You go a third time?
No, this is all like before I go to prison the second time, but all the
Okay,
charges they
okay.
put together as one
I gotcha.
and ran it concurrent.
And then that was the 14 months.
Yeah,
Where
that
were
was-
you at the second time?
Well, it really wasn't even like prison, CRC, and then I went
Yep.
to this OSP program. But you had to go through the Supermax to get to the level 1 camp. And it was basically a program for people that had drug issues.
What was the Supermax like?
Not home. It was like the most eerie place ever. You pull up and it's like you kind of go underground. And then you go in and there's like this elevator, and it was a crazy experience. it was kind of a wake up call. Seeing that, I'm like, if I continue this path, like, it's likely I'm going to end up somewhere like this.
Yeah, I'm just gonna be here
Yeah.
for a while.
Yep.
So how
So,
long did you sit there before you moved to the?
well, they do the intake there and then you go over.
Okay,
So it's just like through the day,
okay,
basically.
okay.
Yeah.
You get to your next spot, and how was the 14 months? Smooth.
Smooth. I worked out all the time, did the drug program, worked in the kitchen. I did have another charge that I went to Franklin County for. Um, and while I was in there, I got into a real bad fight. Basically got my ass whooped. I punched the wrong dude. There's like 10 of them that jumped on me. And, I remember when it happened, I'm on the ground and they're holding me down, beating the hell out of me.
Why? Why
And
did the fight occur? What was it over?
I felt like dude disrespected me a couple times. And, I'm the one that took off originally and swung.
What was he saying?
So the first time he made like a rude comment. The second time, there was a guy leaving. He was at the bunk underneath me, and I wanted it. And then dude just kind of came over, threw his shit down, and like just kind of discredited me.
Okay.
I let that go, and I'm on the top bunk, and I'm talking to somebody. And my feet are dangling, and he smacks my foot, and like in a rude way, it was like, get your feet out from my face. At that point, I took it personal, and I'm kind of in my head like, don't let them disrespect you like that. So I took off on them.
In your cell?
In the pod. This is the
Okay.
workhouse, so it's in the pod. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So when that happened, we ended up I had him in a headlock. We fall to the ground, and I open my eyes and I just see feet all around me. I'm like, oh, this ain't gonna end well.
It's over with.
Yeah. So from that point, he runs to the back and he's like, where's the poker at? And they're like, we flushed it. So I'm like, all right, I just need to make it out of this alive without getting my teeth kicked in. And then they kind of held me down, and was hitting me with the broomstick, the mop stick, the mop ringer.
They had you with a ringer too?
Yeah, and I'm like running around trying to get away from the dude that had the mop stick. And so my mouth was swollen completely shut. It was black and blue. I thought my jaw was broke. I had black and blue like checker prints from the mop ringer all up and down my body. I ended up having to go to medical. Jaw wasn't broke; it was just really bruised. And then they ended up taking me to the hole for that.
They took you to the hole?
Yeah.
I'm assuming they took the other guys to the hole too.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, they thought I snitched, but I didn't. They reviewed the cameras. So,
right.
I mean, there's nothing that, I went to the hole too, so. And at that point, I'm like, I'm not cut out for this. Like, these dudes are ready to die for this, and I'm not.
Yeah, dude. There's crazy motherfuckers in there that just don't care.
Yeah.
It's wild.
And that's when I knew I wasn't cut out. For that lifestyle.
It's wild. So when you so you have this thought, okay, I'm not cut out for this.
Yeah.
So is that like the first time you thought to yourself, maybe we should do something about this?
Yeah, for the most part, I was okay at kind of doing time and, blending in and kind of flying under the radar. But, at that point, it was like I bit off more than I could chew, pretty much. And I was lucky to make it out. And I'm like, something worse is going to happen if I continue. I'd like to say I stayed sober through it. I didn't, but I will say I didn't get in trouble again after that.
Okay. So that was your last stint.
Yeah.
Okay, so you come back out on the streets.
Yep. I ended up going to the halfway house.
Okay.
I did relapse while I was in there.
Okay.
From a relationship. And
dude, it's amazing how women will. People like us, I don't know what it is, but that shit will take you back out so fast.
It's like, I'll show you, I'm going to mess my whole life up,
Yeah,
I mean? Crazy.
you get mad at them, and then you get high at them.
Yeah.
And you hurt yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's insane. And there's a reason why the rule of thumb is don't date in the first year of recovery.
Yeah.
And that would be it.
Yep, absolutely. I've seen it take more people out, and it's taken me out just about every time,
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. But, yeah, in the halfway house, man, I started getting high probably about a month before my release. Somehow managed to make it out. day one, I get into the car with that girl that I robbed. Um, she was there,
What?
and yeah, she pulled up, and we try to do this thing again, and I'm in the car in the parking lot, basically using the seatbelt to tie off to get high. That's how.
Immediately.
Yeah, immediately. Um,
She bring it to you?
yeah, yep,
What?
yep. She brought it to me.
After you robbed her blind?
Yep, yep,
Holy shit.
yep. She brought it to me, and we got high that day, and it just progressed to sleeping in her car, not knowing when we were going to eat again. Just like barely scraping by. We ended up staying in this crack house where like roaches were falling off the ceiling, bed bugs were crawling on walls. Dirtiest place I've ever lived. Thing is, I was raised better than that.
Right.
I was a clean person growing
Right.
up, and I was just to that point I didn't care. All I cared about was getting high. Eventually she left again, and there I am, stranded homeless.
She left you. She left you again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Said I had enough. Woke up with a note, and she was gone. Yeah. So I ended up sleeping on the streets for a while, and this is kind of when I first get introduced to sobriety. Um,
Okay.
I remember my parents would let me come to their house and eat and shower, and my dad was like, "We can get you help if you want it," and so him and my uncle take me to net care.
Okay.
From net care, I get there.
And net care is like a. How do you explain net care? It's like a.
More like a suicidal
Yeah, it's like
mental
a
health place.
like a psych ward type place, but they can
Yeah.
also get you recovery services. It's like an in between type thing.
Yeah, it's like an intake, and then they refer you to
Yeah.
other services.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Whatever services you need. But yeah, I remember going there and thinking like my whole life's over. I'm crying. I'm like, scared. I don't know what for. I'm not on the street. I'm not starving to death um, or any of those things. But that's the first thing I thought of was like I'm not going to be able to get high. Like
Yeah.
that was my security blanket.
You knew that at that point that was going to be gone for a little while. And
Yeah.
scared the shit out of you, I would have to assume.
Yeah, absolutely did.
So where'd they send you?
So I ended up going to Maryhaven.
Okay.
I did their detox, and I remember, eating and having a bed and just a roof over my head and a shower, and those things felt really good. We take that for granted, and none of those things are really promised. Um, so from that point, I'm like, I need to do the residential program. Did that, and then they told me about this faith-based program called the Refuge, which
I've
is
heard of it.
yeah, it's located here in Ohio. It's
like out in the middle of fucking nowhere, isn't it? Like
yeah,
a farm.
there's phases. At the time, it was Vinton County was like phase one, out in the
Okay.
middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So, but the program was really tough.
You went.
Yeah,
I
went.
had 2 opportunities to go, and I turned them both down. Just because I never went to treatment. I always went to jail. Jail was my treatment.
Yeah.
What was that like?
So it was like a boot camp for Jesus. Basically, I always believed that there's God. I just never really like practiced the Bible or church or anything
Religion.
really. Yeah, religion. But the program definitely helped me. I remember they would have us like clean and work on the property and stuff, and I was just miserable doing it. I'm like, I don't want to do this crap. And then the next day, they were like, we're going to do the same thing we did yesterday today, and I'm like, oh my god, like. So I remember I didn't know what to do. I knew I didn't have any other options. So I'm like, help me understand why I'm doing this. And I started working the program and doing things I need to do with integrity. Um, it taught me how to be a decent human being, how to treat people, work ethic, just to be a responsible person, for the most part.
You took suggestions from the people that were in recovery, I assume, and
Yeah.
lo and behold, things started to change.
Things started to change. Life got better. I actually completed the program.
Okay.
For the first time, I had a job in a career path.
Okay.
Um, Ended up moving into a sober living, financed my first vehicle. I didn't get my license until I was 27.
Damn. Yeah. I've. I mean, there's people I know that still don't have it, and they're fucking 50. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's one step at a time.
I remember waking up at like 2 or 3 in the morning in the middle of the night, like, do I have a vehicle? And I'd look out my window and like, man, I do have a car. That's crazy. Like,
Yeah.
it was also surreal to me. I didn't believe it.
I remember my first place. I had like four. I had four felonies on my record. I had like fucking 13 misdemeanors or something, and no one would rent to me. And the only place that would rent to me was this like Section 8 housing unit that would give me a shot. And I mean, it was riddled with drugs and alcohol and addicts and roaches and bed bugs. But it was mine.
Yeah.
You know, it was
Yeah.
mine. I got it.
Yeah.
And I know the feeling, and it feels really good when you start to get some of your stuff back. Um, what happened next, or I guess where you at? Where you at today? What is life like today? Like what? Tell us about your work accident too.
Yeah, so this is kind of leading up to that.
Yeah.
Once I got into that sober living, completed the refuge and everything, I ended up meeting a girl. We got married, got a
Oh
house.
wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
things were going like really, really good. And I ended up getting shared parenting with my kids. I start being in their life. I bounced around from a couple different jobs. Um, and I ended up taking a job at a paint factory. I can't really disclose the name for legal
Okay.
reasons,
Sure.
but um, one night, this was April 8th of 2021. It was on the like east side, like Leonard Avenue and 5th area. I'm working third shift, and the building fills up with vapor, and we made paint. So everything we dealt with was flammable. Something sparks it, and that tank blows up, and I'm one room over from where the tank blew up. Now, this explosion was so massive that the whole building just blew apart. Um,
Really?
so when I came to, which was almost instantly, I try to stand up and I can't, and I look down and my left leg was gone above knee
Like gone.
completely. Blood just squirting out. I can see my bone down to my kneecap, but everything else is gone. It's entirely gone. And I go to lift up my right leg, and my foot's backwards, and both bones were snapped entirely in half. And I'm freaking out. I'm thinking I'm going to be stuck in the building. I'm going to bleed out and die.
You're gonna die.
Yeah.
You thought that was it.
And I did all this work. I mean, I remember looking back on the timeline on Facebook, and the day before this happened, I celebrated 2 years, 7 months clean. Um,
And you had just like got your shit together.
yeah, yeah, I was doing really well for myself.
So what? So you're laying there bleeding out. Your left foot is backwards. You're missing a leg.
Yeah.
How do they get to you? What happens?
So I did the only thing I knew what I could do, which was have faith and pray. And I asked for strength to crawl out. So I start crawling, and the bones are snagging on debris and center blocks. So I got to kick my right leg, which is the one that both bones are snapped, but the foot's still kind of hanging on by skin and tissue. And I got to pull that over, and it's shooting nerve pain up the leg. There was a door that I seen, but there was only maybe enough room for me to lay flat and crawl out. But the door was covered all the way to the top of it. And I'm like, I hope this door pushes open, because if it pushes in, all the center block crumbled in front of it. I wouldn't have been able to get out.
The door.
So I crawl up that and I push it open. I'm able to get out, and I thought it was water on the ground leaking. It was chemical. So that got all of my wounds, and I just was in so much pain. I started kind of rolling around, flailing my arms around, screaming. Nobody can see me still. And I just looked up and said, God, it's up to you now. But my goal was to at least get out of the building.
Could you hear sirens? Was it like were the
No, there were no sirens or anything yet. And eventually I seen a group of firefighters when I'm waking in and out of consciousness. I'm waking up in and out. And I put my arm up and yelled for help, and they came over and got me.
Jesus Christ?
Yep. I had other injuries, burns. My head was cracked open from center block falling on it. I had other minor things, but those were the main things. Was I lost 4 pints of blood, which is half the blood in your body, my left leg, and then luckily they were able to save the right leg. So
So was this like a situation where you got to go after these guys for like civil lawsuit or
yeah,
anything?
yeah, we had a lawsuit which just recently finalized and everything.
I'm assuming you won.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, yeah.
yeah.
And
So
that happened in sobriety, and you did not have to have a drink or a drug over it.
well, shortly after that, I lost everything: the cars, the house, the wife left. I had to file for divorce. I stayed clean for a while, but the only place I had to go was my parents.
This was after the accident.
Yeah. And, workman's comp was paying me a decent amount of money. Um, and I was depressed and everything and not
Like,
doing
yeah,
any
I mean,
recovery.
I can only imagine. Yeah.
So I had a stint of some time where I went back down that path. And now there's fentanyl. Heroin's no longer around.
Yeah, it's different now.
So, and I had stints where I would try to get clean and relapse and try to get clean. And up until this time when I got clean, I was using for like 3 days and I could hardly walk. I was having pain in my sides and my kidneys were shutting down and I had a blood infection. I ended up in the hospital.
God.
And at that point, I'm like, I'm tired of doing this. Something has to change. I've been to treatment so many times. I already knew, what they would teach you, what they would tell you.
Right,
Like,
you could probably repeat it all verbatim.
yeah, I'm like, I just need to go to sober living and go to some meetings and stuff and just try to work a program. And that's what I did. I ended up going to a IOP and did that. Went to sober living. They required 3 meetings a week. Did that. I remember I had a sponsor and I was kind of bullshitting with them, like, hey, get a hold of me, let's go to a meeting, and then he would call me, I wouldn't answer, and I'm kind of in the limbo of doing the same thing, not taking it seriously, and he calls me out on my bullshit, and that hurt. He was a really good friend of mine, but it was what I needed to hear at the time.
It was the truth.
Yeah, he's like, dude, you're going to die. You're going to end up on a t-shirt and we're going to be letting balloons
or
off for
a
you.
Facebook fucking post
Yeah.
or whatever.
And it was a wake-up call, and after that, I took it seriously.
And
I ended up getting a different sponsor, but he said, call me every day, and I did. And we met every week, started doing, step work and stuff and the things that were necessary. And when I knew it was working was when I started handling situations that normally I would relapse over, and I stayed sober through those.
What's an example of one of those?
I went through 2 relationships that didn't end well. I walked away from one. It's just not something I wanted, but I knew I hurt the person in that process, and that bothered me. But I just continued to do the things necessary, and I stayed sober. The second relationship, and this is all like within the first year. Second relationship, the person started drinking, and I'm like, I can't do this. So I
Good
left.
for you.
Yep. And that was really difficult to do. But I made it through it. And I remember after my first year, I'm like, is this all that life has to offer? Is sober living with dudes and going to meetings and like, am I just going to stay at this spot forever?
Yep.
And my sponsor said,
Is this my life now?
Yeah. Well, he basically said, don't become ungrateful for the life that recovery gave you.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. And so I stayed with the process, and, I ended up meeting another girl, and she's my wife today.
Okay.
We're married, and we have a great relationship. She's in recovery too.
Good.
She works at a treatment center, and, we just, the life that I have today, dude, I look back at it, and I'm like, I can't believe this is where I'm at.
It is unbelievable. I know I had an epiphany at one point that institutions, jails, prisons, I remember I was sitting in jail one day and I was like, holy fucking shit, that's why they build places like this for people like me. Because I'll never get it together. So, like, I have to have a place to live.
Right.
And that's why these places exist. And, like, so I really thought that, like, this was just going to be my existence forever, right? Until I pass away, whatever the case may be. So, like, And if you'd asked me what I wanted, it would have been the basics. It would have been a apartment and a car and a
Mm-hmm.
job and maybe a bank account and a girlfriend, and I would have been happy, and I would have sold myself for probably $1 million. Um, it's unbelievable how things change when you get in recovery.
Yeah,
Like, if I heard once that it's the only disease that when you have it and when you get better, you turn out to be a better person than when you had it. So, like with cancer, you can only hope to get back to that baseline, right?
mm-hmm.
Healthy, right? But with recovery, when you have the disease and then you recover from the disease, you become a better person than you were before you had the disease.
Absolutely.
And that's super cool and super crazy. And we're both lucky to be in that spot today.
I think all the experiences from my past helped me appreciate what I have today a whole lot
The
more.
perspective, yeah.
And also gave me the ability to um, treat my wife the way I do and to love her correctly and, just all of the correct things.
So, you happy today?
I'm very happy today. It was rough at first because I really liked her, but somebody in my position, especially nowadays, it's like I'm coming into some money, I'm about to get up on my feet. Obviously, I want to have somebody to share that with, but 9 times out of 10, women would take advantage of that. Um, but I invested in her, and it's been complete opposite of that. Like the way she treats me and loves me and cares about me
Right.
in our relationship, it
That has
was
nothing to do with money or anything like
yeah,
that.
yeah, and it's been great,
It's
and
genuine.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. Dude, congratulations. And I mean, the near death experience in sobriety is insane.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and the fact that you're still living is also a miracle
yeah,
um,
yeah.
for a multitude of reasons. But we appreciate you taking the time coming out, dude. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, same here. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. This has been great.
Thank you.